Hi everybody, welcome to the Daily Dose. My name is Boyd, I'm the supervisor here at the Calgary Zoo Conservatory, and I'm here to give you a little talk on bees, so happy Bee Day. So even though it's Bee Day, I'm going to talk about flowers and pollination. And bees are really important to pollinate plants. However, a lot of plants don't rely on bees at all. In fact, they rely on a whole bunch of other types of animals, birds, bats, ants, you name it. Flowers use whatever they can to get their pollen around. The one next to me is actually pollinated by hummingbirds, and it's called Sanchizia, or zebra plant. You have to guess why it's called zebra plant and why it's on our scavenger hunts. But if you look at the flowers here, they have this really long floral tube. And so in order to get the nectar out of the bottom, you need a long tongue or a long proboscis in the case of a hawk moth. So hawk moths and hummingbirds both get nectar from this plant. And when they do, they transfer the pollen from one flower to another. So here's another of my favorite plants because it's kind of surprising. It's this beautiful sunrise peach color, and when it flowers, it really is a beautiful flower. But this particular one, and the whole group of plants that belong to this genus, it's called Amorphophallus, and they smell like dead animals when they flower. And that dead animal smell attracts in their pollinators, which is beetles, carrion beetles, flies, and they do a really good job at fooling these things. Like the flies, when they get in, and the beetles, they're getting nothing. There's no rotten meat in here. There's nothing for them to eat. But what there is that enticing smell of putrescine and cadaverine, and I'm really experiencing it now. It's amazing. So it does really smell like I've got a dead mouse right next to my head. But this plant is very good at bringing in its pollinators, which are attracted to a perfume that we don't find necessarily that appealing. So here's one of my favorite trees. Well, actually, what it makes is one of my favorite things. So this is a chocolate tree. And chocolate trees are these equatorial plants that started out in South America, and now most of them are grown in places like the Congo because the climate there is just perfect for them. And they're also a little bit strange too. They're not bee or bat or bird pollinated. They're pollinated by a type of midge. And so midges are attracted to the flowers, and the flowers are tiny and they grow on the trunk of the tree. So this plant tends to be in the undergrowth, so it doesn't get very strong, doesn't get all that big, and the pods get huge sometimes, and so they're really heavy, and so they don't break the branches on the tree grows them right on the trunk. But if you get close enough to the flowers, they're just beautiful little flowers. This is a jade vine, and if you get good color on the video you're watching, it has this wonderful shade of blue-green that shouldn't be found in nature. And everyone who looks at it just kind of stops and stares. It's such a beautiful flower. The color is just exquisite. It really looks like a plastic flower that someone has made. And so this, like I said, it's from the Philippines, and in the Philippines, it's basically endangered. It doesn't grow that many places, but it's such a beautiful flower. It's been propagated out to conservatories around the world and other places in the tropics where it's grown as an ornamental plant. And this one is actually very cool too because it's pollinated by bats. So bats will come in and they'll basically just brute force their way into the flower and bend it all over the place. And when they do that, the pollen actually drips on the top of their head. And when they go to the next flower, the stigma, which is the female part of the flower, is there to catch the pollen when the bat visits them. So in our world, in the conservatory, I've tried pollinating by hand and no luck whatsoever. And I felt kind of bad about it until I found out one of the top botanical gardens in the world took 40 years or so to get a seed pod. So I went, I guess I'm okay. So I've got a little bit of time left before I need a seed pod anyway. So we're in the butterfly garden now, and in this garden we like to grow a lot of plants that, of course, the butterflies like for nectar. This is one. So this is a Philippine clerodendron. And it's got beautiful red flowers on. And if you look closely at it, it has a nice long floral tube, but not too long. If it's too long, the butterflies can't get their proboscis down to get the nectar out. So this one is really good for some of the bigger butterflies like the Asian swallowtails. And you'll see them hovering in front of this flower so they don't disturb it, and just putting their proboscis in, getting nectar out, moving to the next flower, and they'll spend minutes and minutes at a cluster of these flowers. And so they do a little bit of pollination while they're at it. During the summertime, I notice I get a lot more berries on these plants than I do if the butterflies aren't here. So here we are, still in the butterfly garden, and all around my head right now is a plant that's called Shower of Gold. And this is a great plant for all sorts of pollinators. Bees will visit it, butterflies love it because it's full of nectar, and it always has flowers on it. Flowers all through the summer, and even in December you'll see flowers on this plant. And it's a little beautiful Central American plant. You see it commonly grown through Florida and pretty much everywhere in the tropics just because it's so dependable. Oh yeah, and when you do pruning on it, it smells like peanut butter. In Calgary, you're obviously not going to be growing chocolate or zebra plants or clock vines in your yard, but we have ways that we can bring pollinators into our gardens with plants that are completely hardy here, and they'll bloom beautifully every year for you. In my own yard, I like planting heucheras, which you can look up, but they're a beautiful little border plant. They're full of bumblebees all the time. Alyssum, which you can grow as an annual border, is just loved by butterflies and bees. Oregano is a great thing to grow. You can use it cooking, but it's got beautiful blue flowers on it a good chunk of the summer, and it's really popular for all varieties of bees. So when you start doing a look around your yard, you can actually do things planting trees, like apple trees in spring, and they'll be full of bees early on because they bloom so early in the spring that it's one of the first really good sources besides dandelions that the bees can use. We hope the next time you're planting your garden that you give a thought to the pollinators that'll be coming into your garden and plant things for them too. Thanks for tuning in on Bee Day, and thank you for supporting wildlife conservation.